The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests today are Brian Milne, who is the mayor of Southgate and warden for Grey County, and Liz Buckton, who is a senior policy planner with Grey County. And we're going to be talking about something that is, I know, on everyone's lips: housing. I mean, that is a critical issue, no matter where you are in this province. And Liz is heading up the housing file for Grey County. And I'm looking forward to a really interesting conversation, not just in terms of housing, but in terms of a few other issues. Okay, well, let's start with housing. Brian, I'm going to put this on to you first. In the last couple of weeks, there was a proposal which came forward, and actually, I interviewed Ross Kentner on this proposal, using land that is from the former high school in Meaford for affordable housing, which I thought was a very interesting proposal. And it came to County Council at its last meeting, and you're about to get a report. What's going to happen, do you think? What's this housing proposal all about, first of all?
Well, just to preface all that, you're right. The property is the former sports field, really, I believe, from the former high school there in Meaford. And, you know, the municipality of Meaford saw an opportunity to provide some space for affordable or attainable housing, and put forward an interesting proposal to the county to try to bridge finance until they could get a developer that was interested in doing that, and doing a project on that property. And where the rubber hits the road basically was that County Council gave our senior staff the authority to negotiate to an upset limit for that property. The school board, on the other side of the coin, had an appraisal on that property which was significantly higher than what our upset limit was to negotiate to. And in that respect, I can't fault the school board for wanting to get every dollar of value out of that property, because their budgets are strained as well. So there lies the issue there. The county, to this point, is hampered because we have restricted the upset limit of what we're prepared to offer, which is considerably lower than what the school board is seeking. So I think you can tell what the outcome is to this point.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the school board is also constrained by provincial regulation that if they sell an asset, they've got to sell it at market value. They can't sell it for less than market value.
No,
so
which is an interesting.
We need to have a conversation with Mr. Ford and the government.
Well, and Mr. Lecce as well. It's unfortunate because at one time the taxpayer paid for that property for the high school, so the taxpayer owns it already. And now for the province to force another taxpayer to pay again for the property seems a little bit wrong, quite frankly. But that's what the legislation says. You're quite correct, and that's what the school board is doing. Yeah, and I can't fault them for that. Really, I can't.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because indeed the need is great.
The need is great, and the property is, excellent location. It's walkable to a lot of the services in town in Meaford. It's like I say, it's walkable. It's a lovely green space. It ticks so many boxes of that affordable housing issue that I'm sure you're going to get into with Liz, that it is a shame. And, I don't want to say the conversation is over, but at this point, it looks like it's going nowhere so far.
Well, maybe you'll have to have a conversation with Mr. Byers and Mr. Lecce.
Well, I'd be happy to join you with that conversation.
And we'll see if we can get Liz in on that conversation as well.
Absolutely.
I know from my past interview with my most recent interview with Ross Kentner, the mayor of Meaford. He was very enthusiastic, and the council itself is very enthusiastic about this idea. And it just seems like, to use a rather overworked and overworked cliche, like common sense. But we shall see.
Right.
We shall see. Well, Liz, just out of curiosity, because you're the, can I use the term housing guru at the county?
I mean, you can.
Yes, you can.
Sure.
Hey, your boss says I can call you that.
Wonderful.
So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to learn a whole heck of a lot and really immerse myself in the issue over these past 18 months. So if that levels up to guru status, I'm on board. That works for me.
Is what the warden says makes sense, that this ticks a whole lot of the boxes. From your perspective as someone who is knowledgeable and deeply knowledgeable in our housing needs, does this meet the needs of a portion of our community here in Grey County?
Yeah, so I think we've definitely been looking at a lot of the data around our housing supply, about our household incomes, and trying to understand what options exist for people and what options don't exist for people based on their household incomes. And so I think there is really a need to try to be looking to create additional housing. And that's not necessarily building additional housing. It could be repurposing other buildings as well. But we're really trying to kind of target into that low and moderate income households because there's not a whole lot in the market that serves them at this point in time. And I think the challenge is that the cost of creating housing has become such that it's very difficult, I think, for the market, just based on typical factors, to create housing at that price point. And so that's where that idea of municipal and public lands kind of comes in, is that land cost is a fairly substantial cost of an upfront development pro forma. And so trying to look at those opportunities to strategically remove that cost from those developments that are really targeted to the type of housing that we need. So I think, I did have the opportunity to speak to Meaford Council before, or as a part of that discussion around those lands. And I think the mindset is right there, right? They're looking at available resources in their urban area. That one does tick a lot of the boxes in terms of its location. It's flat, it's high, it's dry. It's all of those good things that you want for a parcel for development, and could provide an opportunity if the numbers can work. And I think getting the numbers to work is the challenge a lot of the time these days.
Right. You make a good point about the numbers working, because interest rates are having a huge impact on the market, from what I understand. That builders are saying, it's expensive. Got to have prices that return our investment. But let's go a little deeper on this. This project in Meaford is, if I understand it, what would be called non-market housing. Is that correct?
That's one of the options that they could pursue on those lands. So market housing is your traditional housing that is available for rent or sale on the market. Non-market housing is kind of targeted housing that's administered to a particular price point, and it's kept outside of market speculation. So oftentimes they're able to provide that at a lower cost over a longer period of time, because it's set up without a profit motivation as part of that project pro forma. And so I think either of those options could look good for a site like that. I think what we've been seeing in terms of projects in the public sector recently for non-market housing are often some kind of mix of price points within a single project. And again, it's about making those numbers work. So you might find a project with, say, half of the units at market rate, maybe at 25% at slightly below market rate, and then 25% deeply affordable. And it seems that kind of mix is able to achieve affordability and viability based on the costs of development.
Now, non-market housing is sometimes referred to, at least it used to be referred to, as social housing. Is that definition still in play?
So social housing would be one example of non-market housing. There are other types. So for example, cooperative housing is another example of non-market housing. Private co-housing opportunities where people are buying them for a specific population or group might be another example. So it's kind of that broader umbrella for all types of housing that are kept aside from the market factors. But yes, social housing would be one of those types of non-market housing.
What happened back in the 1990s that caused us to move away from government support of social housing? Can you outline that very briefly?
Sure. Yeah, very high level. So I think historically the federal government had provided a fair amount of subsidy and energy into creating social housing units and administering those units. My understanding is that in the 90s that was downloaded to the provincial government, and certain elements of that portfolio were then further downloaded to local municipalities and housing service managers at the local level to deliver that housing. I've heard different opinions on it, but I think the consensus that I've heard anyhow is that didn't come with the amount of funding. Those downloads didn't necessarily come with the amount of funding to do that in a viable way or to grow that supply, which is where we are now, realizing that we really haven't been creating a whole lot of those types of units at those price points for the last 30 or 50 years. And so we're a little behind in terms of that supply. Right at the time where the costs now are such that to create that new supply is very challenging.
If we go back even further, post-war housing boom was fueled by what was then Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and there were things like guarantees of mortgages, and I've even come across in my own wandering through the internet a catalog of 67 homes from the 1940s, almost all under 1,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. And it was an offshoot of wartime housing, which was built for workers at various munitions plants across Canada. But what this did in the post-war era was that it gave contractors standard ideas to work with. Yes. And we actually, if you look around Grey Bruce, you'll see some of those homes. You'll see a lot of them in Owen Sound, under 1,000 square feet, mm-hmm. and sometimes prefabricated or kit homes. But these were all, dare I use the word, government seeded, because they provided the seeds for private business to do some really cool things. Mm-hmm. Gee, wouldn't it be nice if we had that kind of energy from our federal and provincial governments? Brian, you bite your tongue.
I'm chewing on it pretty hard over here, David.
I'll bet you are. I'll bet you are. Because how do you feel as though you're the warden, you're the chief presiding officer of the county? This seems like a huge load that's getting placed on the shoulders of the county. Do you feel supported by the province or the feds?
Real quickly, no. Not at all. I'll go back as far as devolution in the Mike Harris era. The philosophy of that provincial government at the time was, well, the local governments know what's best for their own local municipality. And that's true. But at the same time, if you're not going to flow the funds to maintain, let alone build more, then what do you think is going to happen? Municipal governments are not in a position to build more housing without supports from both the federal and provincial governments. And that, just as Liz outlined, it just hasn't happened by and large. And now, as she said, quite rightly, we're way behind and the demand is skyrocketing. And so it just compounds the problem over and over and over again. And I don't know what more to say other than that. No, we're not supported.
Mm-hmm. I remember having a conversation with Brian, I'm not trying to give a stereotype here, but a retired farmer who told me that the mayor and council of a certain township, so we're going back to pre-amalgamation days, in Grey County, I'll say go as far as that, took great pride in making sure that taxes never went up 1 penny in a year. But the problem was that, of course, nothing got done. The roads ended up in fairly bad shape, and they were not prepared for amalgamation and for housing, and so we kind of end up with the place we are now. When you
I was going to say, Dave, you don't have to go too far to find municipal politicians that are still of that mindset. They're very proud that if they come in at 1%, they think, my God, we've solved the world's problems. No, you haven't. You've compounded them. All you've done is kick the can down the road to the future generations that are going to have to pick up the slack because you didn't have the whatever to raise the taxes to the rate where they need to be. And that doesn't mean that I'm not sympathetic or empathetic to the taxpayer because they have to come up with the taxes. I get that. But if you look around the world at the state of what some people are living in, we are incredibly blessed. We are incredibly rich in this country. And we need, I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but it's not a matter of not enough dollars. It's what are our priorities and how are we going to share those dollars around to the community so that everyone shares in the richness of this country. And therein, I think, lies the dilemma. And until we figure that out and walk in the talk, the problems will continue.
Sure. I think you're onto something. I know that Mayor Kentner said something very similar recently, that he has been pushing a 1%, I think it's a 1% levy for housing.
Mm-hmm.
And his point is that if we don't do it, we're going to find ourselves in an even deeper hole than we are now. And he was very, very blunt. He was very blunt that people had, we have to be on the right side of history on this. And the right side of history is to support housing.
You only need to look at the infrastructure deficit across the country, really. It's billions of dollars. And that's because we haven't reinvested taxes into that infrastructure to keep it up to date and keep it ahead of the population increase and the demand. And so this is a very similar situation. The housing has got to the point where it's literally starting to fall apart. It's getting aged. It needs to be replaced. It should have been replaced years ago, some of it. And here we are. So it's the same problem.
Yeah. And does it make it more complex that there are multiple fingers in the pie? Like there's various municipalities, there's county, there's province, there's feds. Does that complexify things?
Well, I'm going to let Liz take that one because I could go on a rant about government and everything else. I mean, you're opening so many doors here, David. I don't know which one to pick, but I'll let Liz have that one.
Hey, you're the politician, Brian. Come on.
Yeah, so yes, it's a complex system, right? Like there's lots of players involved in the creation and maintenance and approval of housing. I think the way that I view planning, for example, and the local governance role really is around trying to kind of balance the wants, but more so needs of our community with the land and resources that we have available. And so, I think in trying to do that, we are trying to bring along county organizations, local organizations, nonprofits, all of the support services that need to go alongside of that housing to make that housing viable for certain populations. And we're trying to do that in some kind of lockstep so that it works well in a streamlined manner. And I don't know that we're quite there yet. But I know within the County Housing Action Plan that we've been working on, kind of setting a bit of a collaborative approach and some coordination in action is one of the focal points there, because I do think we have to be kind of marching in a similar direction so that our policies and our approaches can be kind of conversant back and forth with one another. And so we're not undermining each other either. That's a major challenge, right? Where you put your energies, if we're not putting them in the same place, in the same direction, we're losing out on an opportunity for pooling resources, for pooling energies towards some of these solutions that may be available to us.
And let's be honest, the needs of the various municipalities are also very different. Town of Blue Mountains needs for housing are very, very different from, dare I say it, Southgate or Owen Sound or Chatsworth.
Actually, I'd push back on that a bit, David, because if you saw the
You're
rate
right,
of growth
you're right.
down here in Dundalk, and that's not to take anything away from Old
Nope.
Sound or Blue Mountains or any of the other municipalities, but Southgate's growth has been anything but spectacular. It has been unreal down here.
Well, yes, you've got your McDonald's open. That's true.
Well, not quite yet, David. Not quite, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean, anyway, yeah.
Okay.
It's coming.
I think you're absolutely right, Brian. You're absolutely right, because I was talking to someone in Durham recently, and I've said this on the air before, that they're very happy living in Durham, but their kids from Mississauga decided to move to Mount Forest to be closer to grandma. And I mean, we're seeing more and more. I'm sure you're seeing people commuting from Southgate down into the north end of Peel region.
Absolutely, and there's no question it's the proximity to the GTA that is driving a lot of this. There are, as you say, a lot of commuters coming out of Dundalk. If you're at that corner of Highway 10 and Grey Road 9 at 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, you don't put your head down because you're going to get run over. But on the other hand, we can't discount the working from home contingent that has got very large, of course, from the pandemic, and it's dropped off some, but there's still a lot of people working from home, and I think that will continue for the foreseeable future. And with the enhanced internet connections that are available to people in town now, that's very much a viable way to work. And so those people aren't leaving home during the day. So
Absolutely.
those people are looking for more services in town because they're not able to stop at wherever on the way home from the GTA anymore because they're not driving down there. So as I said before we go on air, though, more houses, building more housing doesn't mean just more houses. It's all sorts of things that need to come along with it.
Right. It's the infrastructure, and the SWIFT initiative, which the previous warden was a strong proponent of, has really started to pay benefits.
Absolutely.
People are able to live on the back concessions and are discovering, oh yeah, I got great internet. Oh,
Yep.
I can work from home, or I don't have to be in the office, or I can have a home business in that way.
Yep. No, that's very true. Although I can hear people screaming in the background already as you say that, I can't get internet. So there's still places where you can't get it, but in the urban centers, to the most part, it is very much available. And of course, that's where we're seeing most of the growth.
For sure. I'm commuting actually up and down Grey County these days. And what I've discovered is that I now can map the dead zones.
Yes. Yes, you can.
on cellular coverage, I know there's dead zones. Whoops, just a minute, we're going to lose signal here.
Yep.
And so we're not there yet.
You go down through the Rocky there, you're going to lose the signal.
Absolutely. You're actually back in I'll tell you, the worst part for me is south of Grey Road 25, between Grey Road 25 and Grey Road 4.
Yeah.
Down through down Mulock Road. That's
well, the hollows do get kind of deep out in there, so I'm not surprised.
Unlike the flats of Southgate.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Liz, I wanted to come back to something that we talked about a moment ago. We're winding down towards break, but I wanted to touch on it, and that is housing financing. And because traditionally, you buy a house, you get a down payment, then that means a mortgage, and today mortgages are looking at 30 and 40-year mortgages because of the interest rates, and that's way new territory. But are there other financing options that are available to people, or that might be available to people, or even contractors?
Sure. Yes. So I think individuals buying a home versus, say, a developer financing a project are slightly different animals. In terms of people accessing ownership housing that they're looking to purchase, I think for the most part they are looking at traditional mortgages through a traditional lender or off-market lender. I think on the development side, there's all different kinds of models that can be used to finance those types of projects. Often they are some combination of cash or equity, some sort of debt or lending, and then other incentives or contributions. So for example, the federal government and provincial government do have certain targeted funding programs that are available to provide kind of grant or low interest loan based financing for those targeted projects with certain levels of affordability, certain energy efficiency characteristics, that kind of thing. So those are kind of the main funding sources. I think often kind of traditional lending and some degree of equity or grant contributions. But there are definitely other options available. I think Habitat for Humanity, for example, has developed a really interesting kind of separate mortgage program that they administer for the units that they create. So that would be kind of a niche type of funding for their particular product. And then, there are different types of social finance that I think have operated in different areas over time that might be available to folks that are looking at creating new housing in a slightly different way. So for example, community bonds, where you're able to raise capital for community projects. There's different types of financing options like that. But I do think it becomes a bit of an exercise in terms of trying to stack various different incentives together. We do at the local level have some incentives that we're able to provide. And I know you mentioned Mayor Kentner's approach regarding setting aside some funds through their levy. One of the key tools that municipalities have available to us to incent targeted development is a community improvement plan. And so that's something that many of our local municipalities have in place, and the county has been supporting the development of those plans. And they provide an opportunity as well for municipalities to try and provide some funding towards those projects in different ways. Sometimes it's contribution of land, sometimes it's contribution of cash or deferral of fees, that kind of thing. But I think we're really trying to stack those things together to get to an affordable outcome of those projects.
Mm-hmm. So it's there's a real cornucopia of funding options that are available. Someone might be able to make a career in helping to navigate those funding options.
Absolutely. Those folks do exist. Absolutely. And I think they're doing very well in trying to pull all of that nuance together into a functioning project. Yeah.
Do you find that, you've got a background in planning. Do you find that housing is sort of the new bright, shiny thing? Necessary, don't get me wrong, but the new bright, shiny thing in the area of planning as a planner?
It certainly has been the hot topic of discussion. I know we had, and actually, David, I think you were around a lot of those same tables with me previously, where the focus is really kind of healthy communities more broadly. And we saw a lot of energy around general healthy community and policies and sustainability and kind of getting into some of that climate change mitigation and adaptation. But I think housing has really kind of come out as a front runner issue in all of our minds, just because of the way that it intersects with all of those other things in our community, right? Like, it's not just about having a roof over your head, but it's about shelter options for the employees that man the store, or the nurse that sees you at the emergency room, or any of those kind of worker housing situations. Housing is needed for those supports too. And without that housing, we can't really do community in a super sustainable way, right? It really does undermine our capacity to grow and to do all the things that people hope for in a community that supports their well-being.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to say it, and Brian, please don't take this the wrong way. We've got to take a break. So we'll be back in about 90 seconds and for more conversation, because we ain't done yet. I'm
Look
David
forward to
Shearman.
it.
This is I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and yes, we'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Treaty in Cree is Nascomitoin, an oral agreement, and our agreements were always spoken. For George Spence, the core of treaty was Wichihioin, to help one another.
And so we, the commissioners,
He was there for the making of Treaty 9, where the Cree were told,
we will honor this agreement together for as long as the sun shines and the waters flow.
the Cree made their mark because they were assured that the land would be shared and they would always be able to harvest what they needed. George Spence was my great-grandfather. In his life, he saw many promises of the treaty go unfulfilled.
Treaties were essential to the creation of Canada. First Nations still fight for the agreements to be honored.
Join us next week on Grey County Life. We'll be joined by Colleen from O'Share and Alice from the Salvation Army Food Bank.
Also, Renee from the Owen Sound Animal Shelter will be dropping by with an animal looking for a forever home. Hope you can join us.
Hi, I'm David Shearman. Welcome back to Politically Speaking. My guests today are Brian Milne, who is the mayor of Southgate and the warden of Grey County, and Liz Buckton, who is a senior policy planner at the County of Grey. And as I said before, the housing guru. Liz, Brian, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
Let's jump into something a little more current. And that, Brian, is the Green Belt. Now, that conjures up all kinds of political stuff. But at the same time, we got to remember that Grey County is part of the Green Belt. It runs right up the spine of the county because because the Niagara Escarpment is part of the Green Belt.
Yep.
You're watching the shenanigans that are going on. What's your take on not necessarily what's going on, but okay, Greenbelt, that's us. Where do you sit on all of this stuff?
Well, I mean, it was when we first heard what he was doing, or the government was doing, the provincial government, it was extremely disappointing, because there was no consultation. In spite of what they said, there was no consultation with county council or any other municipality as far as I could see. But having said that, I will give credit to the premier when he decided to put it into reverse and back up. He's committed to putting that property back into the Greenbelt, and rightly so. But now, and in conjunction with that, and the Western Shore Wardens have had discussions about the other part of that issue, and there are other parts. The other part is the expanding of municipal boundaries, which has done very similar things for developers in certain circumstances. Let's see what they're going to do with this one, because it does very much the same thing. It takes agricultural land out of production, and it enriches some people, shall we say, unfairly, perhaps, in my estimation. So, as a municipal politician, I'm extremely disappointed to see that kind of stuff go on, because there's so many ways we can get ourselves into trouble. We don't need to go looking for stuff like that. So as I say, it's very disappointing, but again, I'll say credit where credit's due. He's backing up on that one, but there's lots of other ways he could back up too and help things along as well.
And just to be clear, the two areas that I'm aware of where their municipal boundaries were changed arbitrarily is down in Ottawa, in the Ottawa area, and the other one is in Hamilton. And there was agricultural land that was taken out of production in both areas, and which was part of Greenbelt. And there was, at least I'm almost, in fact, I know for certain in Ottawa, because City Council was not consulted in any way, shape, or form. It was just done.
Yep.
And this has been an agenda item for Ottawa City Council.
Well, and the City of Hamilton Council had just finished an official plan review, and they were quite satisfied to stand pat on the boundaries that they had in place. And the provincial government, just with a stroke of a pen, said, nope, there's an additional, I think it was 2,000 hectares or something like that they added to the City of Hamilton. Like, where is this coming from? What on earth are they thinking? Their own provincial government, their own housing, I forget what it was, advisory task force said that the shortage of land is not the problem. It is absolutely not the problem. There are lots of problems in housing, but it's not a shortage of land inside the current boundaries.
Yep.
So why all of a sudden throw all this extra land into the boundaries? It makes no sense at all. And I have had conversations with our own local MPP, Rick Byers, and he's at a bit of a loss to make me understand why they did what they did.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Perhaps let's hope the truth will out.
Well, let's hope.
Let's hope.
Although I see in the last day or so that the RCMP have announced that they are doing an active investigation to see what went on.
That's true. That's true. And lest we forget, the police don't make that decision unless they feel there is some evidence of something. We don't know what that is, but they don't do these kinds of things. And then the next step is, of course, can it be prosecuted? And that's is there enough evidence to prosecute? And that's also out of the police's hands. That's a crown prosecutor's hand.
Well, there's the old saying, where there's smoke.
That's true.
And is it prosecutable? I don't know. I guess you could say there's an election in 3 years. We'll see.
Spoken like a true politician.
Just saying.
Okay, Brian. Well, Liz, let me ask you a question. You're a planner. You've had lots of experience as a planner, mm-hmm. And one of the criticisms that planners have come into by the Premier is it takes too long to get things sorted out. Takes too long for developers to have their projects approved. You've been on the flip side of that. What's your take on that comment? Is that? I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. Every time there's a project that City of Owen Sound approved, and maybe the City of Owen Sound is unique, they make a very clear point of saying there is X number of days that happen between the time we got this into our hands and the time we're bringing it forward to you, and it's a very, very tight window. Is that the norm, or what's going on here?
Yeah, so I guess I can't speak for all areas because I think each location has different challenges in terms of bringing forward those applications through the process. But I do think that there is some challenging labels applied to local municipal decision makers and planners or folks completing that function. I've definitely heard some negative connotation indicated around the idea of, gatekeepers, being gatekeepers of that process. And, I guess I would say to that, I think there are some necessary gates to be kept, but it's doing that in a way that's balanced, right? So we don't want to delay anyone. We don't want that to be an undue process. But I think there are a considerable number of issues that we're trying to weave together into a decision that is holistic and upholds our policy objectives, not just related to housing, but also related to infrastructure, those support services, those community services that need to come alongside of that housing. Even just to integrate a site in terms of their water and sewer infrastructure and stormwater involves a level of engineering and coordination between municipal organizations and private developers. It's pretty complex. So it does take some time. I think that there's certainly an imperative to try and streamline our process. And we are going through that right now. We have been working through a planning efficiencies process at the county together with the local municipalities, really looking at how we do process those applications and where there might be opportunities to try and speed that along or remove unnecessary steps or duplication of any manner. But I don't think it's going to be instant, just because it is a complex exercise. So to some degree, we need to have a process associated with that to make sure that we're doing that good stewardship role that our decision makers have been tasked with. And it doesn't happen quick, right? We do have timelines, though. And I know through recent legislation, they have actually enforced some fee penalties if we are not meeting those timelines as well, where municipalities would need to rebate fees to a developer if we exceed those timeframes. So I think it certainly has created a lot of discussion around really how we even more so try to streamline that, because I don't think we're in a position of resourcing where we can be affording to rebate fees for a review process that is ultimately necessary to make sure we're doing good development. Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, you used the word gatekeepers, and part of the role of planners is to make sure that not that there are gates. Well, I suppose it is to say there are gates, but to make sure things like water, sewer, hydrogeology, to use a very esoteric term, are all in place. I mean, all you've got to do is look at a planning application and the number of consent letters that go along with that planning application. It's quite significant. You wouldn't. Why do we need Canada Post's approval? Why do we need the school board's approval? Why do we need the input from the Conservation Authority? And on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, and then are you not also constrained by provincial policy statements?
Absolutely. So we operate in what's called a policy-led planning system in Ontario. And so really the Planning Act sets out the legislation at the top of that system, provincial policy tucked in underneath the Planning Act. And we are required in our plans and our municipal decisions, including capital expenditures, to be upholding the direction and the framework that's provided for us by the province. Our local planning documents are able to go into much greater detail in terms of kind of site by site what our intentions are, but we are still constrained by that policy system. And that comes up quite a bit around the housing portfolio, because that framework does also establish the tools that we have available to us to incent or to target or require certain types of development. We have very limited tools in that regard through that framework. So it can be very supportive for making sure we're incorporating lots of good things into our plans, but it can be also constraining in that it does require us to kind of conform and be consistent with the direction from the province.
Sure. Yeah. So it's not just it's not a simple process. It's a complex process. Planners have to be trained and understand these complex issues. Yeah. And the politicians have to listen to the voices of planners.
Absolutely. And we rely on the planners, and rightly so, to advise us as to what, how does this comply with, as Liz said, the provincial directives, because they need to. And our own official plan and policies that are in place, because the processes were followed to dictate how the community sees the growth, how it wants to grow, if it wants to grow. And so any planning application that comes forward needs to comply with all of that to make sure that it does follow what the community wants. And so, as she said, quite rightly, again, it takes time. Yeah. And not everybody is, developers by and large generally are pretty good, because they do this for a living. So they know it takes time. They have their plans, they have all their studies and so on in place by and large. But, one-off people that are just going to sever a lot and maybe build a custom home, they've never done this process in their life, they are extremely frustrated when they find out, well, can I not get my building permit like today, like before lunch? No, that's not how this works. Sorry. So there's those two extremes, but I think our planning staff, both at the county and at the lower tiers, generally do a pretty good job of accommodating, whatever comes through the door. And I give them a lot of credit for dealing with a lot of disparate expectations. Just if I could, David, just to go back, David, to your comment, about, the provincial government in trying to speed things up. let's not forget that there are, across the province, thousands of building lots that do have, right now, draft approval. And they're just sitting. Some of them have been sitting for years with nothing happening, and they have approval to move ahead. How do we get those ones going? I don't know. I can't force anybody to put a shovel on the ground, but it's frustrating when I hear provincial representatives saying municipalities are slowing things down. There's too much bureaucracy. That is horse apples. There are lots of lots currently in the province that are ready to build on. Let's go, people.
Well, I'm aware of certain plans of subdivision that are 125 years old.
Exactly. Yeah.
They exist.
Yeah.
They have. It would take some work to get them built because they're built to, well over a century old standard, 150 years old. Sorry, they're built to very old standards. But hey, it's a plan of subdivision. That's step one, I guess.
Step one. Yep.
Yeah. Now, Brian, I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into the planning issues, because one of the issues which has arisen, certainly in Owen Sound, is the accessibility issue. And as you're aware, the city disbanded its accessibility committee, or will be disbanding its accessibility advisory committee, AAC. That's what it's called. And the request, which has gone to the county, is to request the county to add one more seat at the table on the county accessibility advisory committee for someone from Owen Sound. The next step will be, and I know it's coming to the county AAC. The next step is to bring it forward to county council.
I think the next step would come toward committee, for recommendation to council.
Okay.
But yeah, and I wouldn't presuppose what the committee might say, but I don't foresee any reason why they wouldn't welcome Owen Sound into the county advisory committee. Yeah,
because I know that in some communities there are multiple municipalities in an advisory committee. So we'll see where this one comes out. Another issue I wanted to ask you about, Brian, was transportation. I mean, if housing is a key and hot button issue here in Grey County, sorry, Liz, so is transportation. And I suppose transportation is related to housing because they go hand in hand.
It's all related to housing.
All related to housing. Everything is related to housing. But I know in Sound, the big question is why can't we get an Uber? And Owen Sound and Grey County are looking at ride sharing services. What's the state of that particular file these days?
As far as I understand, the state of that issue is that we're waiting for a report from staff to see how a rideshare program could potentially work in Grey County. I know that in Wellington County, they've had one now for a number of years. It seems to be working down there, although they've had their challenges as well, of course. But there's potential to have something similar work here in Grey County. So, there's lots of options of how to do it and how much money you want to spend. And I guess that's what the county council are waiting for, is that report to see what are the options, what are the possibilities.
And this is mid-October. When do you expect that report to come forward?
Any day.
Okay.
Honestly, David, I'm not sure, but it's soon. Before the end of year, absolutely.
Okay. So, for as I've always said, read the minutes.
Or even better, tune in.
Even better. Watch us here.
Absolutely nothing else to do with your life. Tune into a council meeting. You'll just be enamored with the sheer drama.
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. The high drama in a council meeting will just have you on the edge of your seat the entire meeting.
Okay. I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot barge pole. But
your wife wouldn't agree with me, David? Come on. Sure she would.
Oh, yeah. Well, Owen Sound Council is not the county council, fortunately.
Well, some would say mercifully, but anyway.
I just said fortunately. Anyway, what I was going to ask you too is that, and are you still on the Board of Health?
I am.
You are. What is happening? Is there anything you can share about the opioid poisoning situation in Grey County? If you want to put your Board of Health hat on.
Well, what I can tell you, unfortunately, is that it's not getting any better. It is another one of those wicked problems that just continues to confound people. But we have, as you will remember from your days on the board, David, a great wealth of very knowledgeable employees at the health unit that are working diligently on this problem. And there are a number of initiatives that they have put in place to try to reduce the challenges with the opioid problem. Unfortunately, a lot of them are reactive to the problem. The widespread availability of naloxone has certainly saved some lives. It's not going to save them all, of course, but it'll save some. The notices that go out on social media and other media about contaminated drugs that have been found in the region, those are helping, I think. We have a safe injection, not an injection site, but a safe injection materials, safe needle site. I forget just how you'd phrase that, but that kind of thing. We will offer all those.
Materials are publicly available and easily available to those who wish them.
Exactly, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's lots of things going on. The health unit is well aware of the issue, and they're working diligently on it. But as I say, it's a wicked problem, and unfortunately, we continue to lose people in our community. Education. It's a big problem.
Sure. Now, let's related to that is, what about this winter? I know that there have been issues in previous winters with cold, with people unable to find shelter, particularly when the temperature, we get that polar vortex whistling in across Lake Huron, and the temperature drops really low. And we have had people who have literally frozen to death. What's the county's response to those issues?
Well, the response is that we're continuing to seek ways to house more people every night. The number of people needing shelter has continued to rise and will continue, I suspect, for the near future because of all the problems we've just been talking about earlier here. It is an expensive venture to house these people. We primarily use motel rooms, and it's a real challenge because we don't, as a county, we can rent those rooms or we can hire those rooms, but we can't say who absolutely can use them because they are still owned by private enterprise, right? So there are some options being considered. Maybe the county needs to own more of those rooms. I don't know. As I say, those options are being investigated. Ultimately, will that save us some money? I hope so. But at the end of the day, the county council is committed to trying to avoid the tragedies that you just mentioned there, because it's never a good story to see in the Sun Times that somebody has froze to death in our community. And you can be the most hard-hearted person in the world, and I don't think you'd want to see that happen. So we are trying to do what we can. We'll never solve the problem because the demand will never end. But we're going to do what we can because, as they say, even a small candle in a dark room is welcome.
Sure. And at that point, I'll put in a quick plug for 211. That if people see someone who might be homeless, you don't have to call 911. You can call 211, and that will get the word to the right place and the right people. If you're in Owen Sound, you can call the administrative number, not 911. No need to call 911 because it's. But if you see someone who is in distress, or who, if it's a cold winter night, you wonder, are they safe? Call 211, and that will get them help. It'll be offered. Okay,
Yep.
People have the right to live rough if they wish, but contact will be made by the county social services. Sometimes it's police services, but that's part of the whole mix. So remember that.
You're right. You're right, David. And I have to put a plug in for our SOS program. The local paramedics do a tremendous job, and all the other support services that administer to folks that are on the street or find themselves on the street and need help. So that program has been immensely successful, and we will continue with that program for sure.
Yes. The SOS program is one of those successes no program is ever 100% successful, but that certainly is one of the successes we've got in our region for to help people who may wish it. It's offered. Offered. And that's the important point. And funding for that, is that now a mainstream program fund? It's not in danger of getting
SOS,
cut off.
You mean? Yep. It's embedded in the budget. I mean, there's always going to be, requests for more, and that's a budget discussion, but the program itself is there. And we will, for the foreseeable future, we will continue to fund it.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
For sure.
Just a way how things have changed. Yes, it has. And, I should say, a lot of people anecdotally will say, well, what about all these people coming into our area using our tax dollars? Well, the fact of the matter is we're not going to turn somebody away at the door just because they come from Oxford County, for instance. But anecdotally, a lot of these people that do find themselves homeless or on the street are Grey County residents. They are from our region. So, it's hard to prove where somebody's from if you're homeless, but most of these people that are seeking help are from our region. And so, don't be afraid that your tax dollars are being spent for somebody from 100 miles south of us, because they're not. Very true, Brian, because one of the things that I am well aware of is that many people are just one incident away from homelessness.
Yep.
But that's a whole other issue. And actually, we're running a good special on Rogers right now for people to find out more about homelessness. But that's a whole other program. Brian and Liz, thank you so much for being a part of Politically Speaking. Always a pleasure to have you here, Brian. You've always got some very trenchant and pertinent comments. Do you like those words?
Yeah.
And
those are, don't ask me to spell them. They're big words, but yes. Thank you very much, David, for having me here. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy these with you.
And Liz, as the housing guru for Grey County, thank you. Always interesting to hear from you from a planner's perspective, and I'm sure we'll have you both back again. And friends, I'm David Shearman. Yes, we will talk again.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Tuesdays on City TV.
We find missing people who have slipped through the cracks, and we bring them home.
We need to talk about how you figured out this location before us cops.
We all have our secrets. You kidnapped a child.
And you kidnapped a man.